This is Terror House Radio with Matt Forney and Bryden Proctor.
Yeah, welcome to a Terror House Radio episode number 30. I'm Matt Forney, your charming and loquacious host and the founder and editor-in-chief of Terror House Press. Joining me, as usual, co-host and producer, the unflappable Bryden Proctor. How you doing?
That one's not a word.
Yes, it is.
Unflappable? It's like, that's just
Yes.
anything that's not a bird.
No, it has a definition.
What is it?
Unflappable, having or showing calmness in a crisis.
That's not true. Let me look that up. Unflappable. Huh. What a dumb fucking word.
It's a compliment.
Yeah, but it's a dumb word. It's got flap in it. I mean, it just doesn't sound like a real word.
You don't like the word flap?
I mean, it's fine for birds, or like mud flaps, or like anything, you know, because it's like unflappable is just like... Oh,
Flapjacks?
Flapjacks are just a fancy way of saying pancake.
Yeah, I forgot you don't like pancakes.
Nah, I'm a waffle guy if I gotta do
Oh,
it.
yeah. On the show today we have a guest. We'll be bringing on David Lohrey. Lohrey is the author of Terror House's next book, which will be out this week. It'll be out on Friday. BLUFF City. It's a collection of his best short stories and poems about such enlightening subjects as President Trump and Japanese S&M clubs. And there's a whole lot more in there. Elvis groupies. It's a real riot. David's a longtime contributor to Terror House magazine. I'm sure some of you have read some of his poems and short stories and whatnot. Funny guy, hilarious writer. Happy to have him on. I'm sure Bryden is very excited about this too.
I think instead of saying like, oh, that's a laugh riot or whatever, you should be like, oh, that's a George Floyd protest. It's 9 a.m. I'm not gonna be on my best quick, I'm unflappability.
Yeah, we're recording this early because Bryden is going to Reno, so.
Yeah, well, and times
Hey,
are
that'll
different
be
with
fun.
the guest, and we got a bunch of stuff going on. It's a wild week.
I mean, I woke up pretty early this morning at 8 a.m. It's about 5 minutes to 3 right now, so I'm feeling okay.
Yeah, I woke up early. I mean, that's not the thing. I went to the store, I got some wine, and then I went and got some McDonald's for breakfast, and it's just a weird time to be awake and doing this. I don't like change, man.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
When things change, I get all twitchy, and then I become nonverbal, and my wrist starts to bang against my chest.
Brian does not like change. He throws it at strippers.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they would let you do that, that would be funny as shit. Just silver dollar, like, right in her asshole.
I'm pretty sure they had to do that in Canada. I mean, Canada is the country that has like $1 and $2 coins, so.
Who do you think was the first stripper?
I mean, you'd have to go back to antiquity because it's, stripping is one step removed from prostitution, which is the oldest profession. So, I don't know. I think Eve was the first. Eve was the first stripper because they were both naked in the Garden of Eden.
Well, it says here American-style strip clubs began outside of North America after World War II, in Asia in the late 80s, Europe in 78. So 75.
Oh, so it's an American thing.
Yeah, it looks like
at least in the modern era. At least in the modern era, because I'm pretty sure people have come up with the idea of women doing naked dances before. But like in the modern era, it was an American thing.
So in France during the late 19th century, Persian shows such as the Moulin Rouge and, I don't know, Foie Gras, Baguette, were featuring attractive, scantily clad. Okay, so that's like 1895. Yeah, I guess we probably wouldn't really recognize what a strip club looked like, pre World War II or whatever. Huh. Interesting.
I know they had something called I know they had something called the Naked Dance in Weimar, Germany, but from my understanding, that faded out after hyperinflation set in.
Sure.
And I don't think it involved just stripping. It was like it was basically an orgy on stage.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been hard. You had to, you couldn't see anything once you got enough barrels of that cash up there. They, couldn't see anything.
Plus, you can't really stuff it all in a thong.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way it is. Oh, well.
But, yeah, anyway, we're going to have David Lohrey on coming right up. And, David, welcome to Terror House Radio, and thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Now, I do this with all our first-time guests because it's always a good idea. I've done this for podcasting for years. It's always a good idea to just let the interview subject to talk about themselves for a bit. So I'm sure a lot of Terror House readers know who you are. They've read your submissions and whatnot. But could you just give the Cliff Notes version of yourself, your work, etc.?
Sure. Well, I wrote plays for many years, actually, from college, I don't know, from about age 25 to about 45. And I mainly worked in New York and LA doing staged readings and small kind of off Broadway type little pieces and so on. And I don't know, I can't really explain the motivation, but suddenly I started writing poetry rather in earnest about 5 years ago. And I had done some fiction over the years. And again, I guess primarily because I was living in Japan and I had more time. My previous teaching jobs had been rather demanding. So I started writing a memoir of my teaching experience in Saudi Arabia, where I lived for 6 years. And then I had been in China for a while. I taught public school in Los Angeles for 15 years, and then moved to New Jersey and taught at the college level for about 10 years. And so I'm very much a kind of frustrated, happy retired person. So I'm happy to get out of teaching and reflecting a great deal on the state of America. And I guess a lot of my poems reflect my sense that a lot of the things that we read about or see these days on the streets in American cities, I experienced in my classroom in Los Angeles. So I really understand the mentality of the what is it you want to say? Anyway, the undisciplined, the chaotic mind of the American youth. I feel I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I really know it from being cooped up in classrooms with 30 or 40, 15, 16, 18-year-old kids. Anyway, so and all of this, I think some way or another comes across in my writing. Sometimes my anger, my frustration, my amazement, mainly my amazement, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, teaching in LA, that sounds absolutely rough. I mean, I'm not a teacher myself, but my mother used to be a teacher. She got out of it a long time ago. She was a special education teacher in upstate New York, and she had some. She I'm not gonna dox her, but one of the schools she worked at was a private Catholic school. It's not exactly much of an upgrade from the public schools. But yeah, teaching in LA, of all places, you do go over some of that in one of the stories in Bluff City is inspired by your experience in LA. Could you talk a bit more about that? I mean, yes. I imagine with what's going on in the U.S. right now, that's probably a big thing on people's minds. You had a portrait of the insanity as it was developing in the womb.
Right. Well, what happened is I graduated from college and then I found myself in LA. I prefer Southern California to the Bay Area, and I was living there for several years, and I got into ESL teaching. My students were almost all Japanese, and I ended up going to Japan, living there for many years, and then I came back to teach in America, to teach Americans, for the first time in public school. And so I was there then 15 years. And I taught in two environments. One was in Hollywood, as a matter of fact. And half of my students were Latino and half of my students were Soviet Armenians. A very interesting, time really to be in LA. Yes.
It reminds me of, are you familiar with the writer John Dolan?
No.
He wrote an article. This is like a decade old. I'll send you the link afterwards. He wrote an article about how he had been employed teaching at the American University of Iraq in Suleimania, which is in Kurdistan, the Kurdish part of Iraq. And he discussed how his classes were half Kurdish, half Arab. And as he described it, it was like a gang fight in hibernation.
That's right. Well, it was wild. It was a fascinating environment. The Armenian kids, on the one hand, the girls would come with little braided hairdos and little peasant dresses and so on, and they looked rather Greek, as a matter of fact. And they all played the piano or the violin. They were fluent in English, fluent in Russian, fluent in Armenian, and they had very strict parents who would drop them off in used Cadillacs. They were all getting a lot of money from President Bush Sr. As refugees, Soviet, anti-communist refugee programs that really piled in the dough. And so these people were all, having a kind of a good American life, if you will. This is in Hollywood, which is, when I say Hollywood, I don't mean Beverly Hills. This is a kind of seedy Latino ghetto. And these people, I don't know why they came to that part of town, but in any case, they were there in the thousands. And as I said, our school, which had been 100% Jewish in the 50s, as a matter of fact, and the main feeder for UCLA. So it was a rather famous school. But anyway, the Jews had all moved up into the hills and then on to the valley, and became rather middle class or affluent. And so this percolating Latino ghetto, which is almost all of LA today, suddenly had the arrival of these extraordinary people. Anyway, the Armenians, what was so amazing about them was that, most Americans, I think, most of middle-class Americans, are intimidated by urban youth and gangsters. And so, all of the teachers, including myself, were kind of trembling as we walked through campus, with gangsters and hoodlums and kids with guns. And we had students in or their siblings, in lowriders circling the school, all day long, shooting into the campus. And it was a wild environment. But the Armenians, for something that's just simply unique about the Soviet experience, were extremely tough people. And the Latino gangsters didn't intimidate them at all. And these Latino kids actually were rather sweet in comparison. They were, in as many ways, really a gentler people. But the Armenians were tough, and they wouldn't take any crap. And their idea of fun, for example, that we had, of course, all of our the nutrition breaks and the lunch breaks and all of this going on all the time. And the Armenians would hilariously sit I would guess about 20 of them would sit on long bleachers that were set up against the back of the wall of the buildings. And then one of the boys would stand and then run maybe 100 yards and then bang into the last seated student and try to knock the kid off that was at the other end of the bleacher. This is a tremendous force. He would smack into the one kid, and then theoretically the kid at the other end would fall off, or all of them would fall off sometimes. But so these were tough kids, and so they were not intimidated. They would walk around campus, and what they did not do was they did not play this ghetto game that American kids are into, which is the sucker punch, the idea of running by somebody and just punching them in the back of the head. That was unthinkable. So the Armenian kids were very much kind of old school fighters. They would put up the dukes and knock your head against the wall. Or
classic, schoolyard,
yeah,
rough
exactly.
image before everything just kind of went to hell.
That's right. So it was a fascinating blend, an odd world, and I kind of liked it. But I stayed too long, and then to punish myself even more for all of my sins, I transferred to Watts. And so I taught in the middle of Watts for several years. And in a weird sort of way, that was a good experience. It was I was there during the OJ business. It was fascinating, really, in many, many ways. And I have a lot of good memories. And one of the good memories, ironically, is when I was attacked by 13 boys after school. The rule at the school was that you left campus. So there's none of this stay after school or, the Bible club or the Latin club or any of this stuff. I mean, at 3 o'clock, people just ran off campus because if the kids walked home alone, they would be attacked and perhaps even killed. So they had to go in groups, and they went quickly, and then the campus was empty. Well, I was one of these kind of stupid goofballs, and I would hang out in my classroom and get work done for the next morning. And I let the time get away from me, and it was about 4 o'clock, and I came out of my classroom, and there was a little mob of students. Well, they weren't even students, as a matter of fact. They were just these kind of loafing youths who had dropped out over the years. Maybe I doubt that they were more than 20 years of age, but probably more like 16, but dropouts and thugs, really, in a way. But the rumor had gone out that I had been giving my students little treats, for doing their homework or something like this, and so they demanded that I turn over all of my goodies to them. But I didn't have any, and I was not young, but I mean, I should have had a greater street presence, but I didn't. And so the boys, as I said, they said, "Hey, motherfucker, give me your, give me that sucker, give me that candy. We want some of that stuff." And so I just very kind of, naively said, "I don't have any of you guys. I'm sorry." Shut up. And then when I heard that, I realized that this was a whole new. Even though my students were tough, they really would never speak to me in such a rude way. And so this "shut up" really alerted me to the fact that I was alone on campus with these guys, and things were kind of. I mean, it wasn't getting physical yet, but I really felt, this is going somewhere. I don't want to, really be a part of this. Anyway, and then suddenly, out of the blue, one of my students showed up, and he kind of took over, kind of commandeered the whole thing. He got me out of there and sort of protected me in an odd way. And this was a very short kid. I doubt that he was more than 5 feet tall. And of course, like all of the kids, he wanted to be a basketball player. So he had already picked out a house in Malibu. He was going to live next to Magic Johnson or something. And he couldn't play basketball to save his life, but this was his dream. In any case, this kid came over to me, didn't touch me, got very, very close to me though. And he had this fascinating talent of being able to talk without moving his mouth. And so he said to me, without the other boys really seeing him talking, he said, "Get back in your classroom." And he, anyway, as I said, he gave me instructions and sort of got me out to my car finally, and away I went. But that was an odd experience, very tough environment. And I guess every month my license plate would be scissored off the back of my car. That was a typical. And in LA, I paid $700 for a car registration tag. It was a big loss. It was really absurd. But anyway, so that was Markham Middle School, right in the center of the town, right below the tower, the box tower, as a matter of fact. An odd place. Anyway, so then I had enough of that. I just couldn't take it anymore, and I resigned and moved to New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something like that might happen in a foreign country. It's like Americans wandering around, gets harassed by foreigners, then like another foreigner who's like less hostile steps in and diffuses the situation.
Right, exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you said you went to teaching in LA after teaching in Japan, and you've also mentioned Saudi Arabia and China. I know you live in Japan now.
Yes.
What are your experiences of Japan, like teaching there, living there, etc.? Because it's one of the major themes in your writing. You've written a lot of for Terror House. You've written a lot of poems and such about Japan.
That's right. Well, so I was in Japan at the height of the economy. This is back in the 80s, and it was an extraordinary time. The Japanese, and I had already been teaching Japanese students in LA, and they were all businessmen and visaed students. So they were rather affluent, certainly middle class. The evening students certainly were businessmen, and they were paid by their companies to study English and to open branches in LA. And then all of this collapsed, you see. But it didn't collapse until after I left Japan. So I went to Japan. I had this fabulous experience teaching there. The school was just oozing money, and I had a nice salary, and I got the full treatment, you know, the round trip tickets and the paid apartment and the good salary and all this stuff. Came back, and then all my friends who stayed back there experienced the collapse, and all of this was taken away. They were all lost their jobs. They were all pulled out. If they kept their job, they lost their apartments. If they lost, you know, all these perks and so forth. And so Japan became a place not to teach. I mean, and while I was in Japan, China was, of course, inaccessible. I mean, nobody was teaching over there. That was totally closed back in the 80s. So I came back to LA, and that was part of the hardship of teaching in LA, was that Japan, it was, of course, so safe. So, you know, the classroom experiences just couldn't be more different than teaching American.
Was that because of the Ronin?
Well, it was. Yeah, the students are just so passive here.
Well, I mean, you don't want one of the samurai coming down on you like that. So I'd imagine, you know, if we had some of those in East LA, then, like, you know, there'd be less of the crime.
Well, the funny it's a funny thing, but actually this militarism exists. The war, you know, is, of course, several decades ago. But I really believe that there is a kind of internalized martial spirit in the students. And this is what, you know, I think in polite society, we never talk about this. We say the war is over and you know, now it's peacetime. But all of that stuff had to go somewhere. And what it does is it goes into this discipline that the Japanese are so famous for. So, of course, nobody's wearing a military uniform, and that is totally gone. It's finished. But the obedience and the cooperation and the team spirit, and that comes over in so many ways. The example is that when the teacher walks into the classroom exists as a unit. They've been off either to a camp or to some kind of training session or something like this. By the way, this is true in China today. When I taught in China, the classrooms are exactly the same. They're organized, and they have a leader, and they have a spokesperson, and there's one person who will be the agent of complaint. So, for example, if there's a problem in the classroom, that person will go to the authorities and say, you know, the teacher's talking too fast, we can't understand him, or the teacher's abusive, and, you know, and so on. So this is all preset. You don't know who this person is that's been elected. You don't necessarily know, you know, how these students were formed. I mean, whether they went on a camping trip or weekender or what. But what you know is that you're the outsider. You go into this room that exists as a unit. And so, for example, instead of having, as you would in Watts, where you know, in a sense, it's a horrible place to teach, but still you have the individual marvelous student. You know, this is the classic line that American teachers always say: I only need one wonderful student to make it worthwhile. Well, in Japan, it doesn't work like that at all. You don't have one wonderful student and 29 losers. You either have 29, you know, wonderful students, or you have 29 losers. Because they copy each other's behavior. And so there's a group think. And this is, in my opinion, this is how the martial spirit survives. And it survives in the office. I've been working for one of the banks here, doing some translation, and just being back. You know, I haven't been teaching, and I haven't really been among Japanese in that way, you know, in a group. And so it's kind of marvelous to go back and to see that this rigor, this discipline, this wonderful, you know, just in terms of punctuality, this just absolutely, it is a militarized environment in many, many ways, but it's, of course, very smooth and soft. It's not, I don't mean to suggest it's harsh or overbearing in any way, but you just see it come over in so many ways. And then, as I said, when I went to China, I went to China 30 years after I had been in Japan. And my Chinese students were exactly the way my Japanese students were 30 years ago. They were like those students back then. China, of course, is now the preeminent country. The students are forward-looking, they're optimistic, they're hardworking, the whole world is laying at their feet. They're ready to take over, and that exists in the classroom. You feel it. They're energetic in the same way my Japanese students were. My Japanese students 30 years ago, wanted to go to LA, or they wanted to go to Australia, or they were ready to go to New Zealand, or wherever it was. They were ready to move out, take over, enjoy, sightsee, whatever it might be. And that spirit's lost here now. That economic depression that started about 1990 has, I think, permanently affected the people here. They've lost their optimism and their hopefulness. But the Chinese have it. They have this dynamic, and they quite literally, the Chinese students, of course, I taught there in a university. But for 6 weeks, my students would go to a Mao training camp, and I was sent away. I mean, I returned to the States. But my students all went in a rigorous ideological, training, and literally marching like ROTC students, and then and all that's required of all the students. And I would ask my students to write essays, about their dream in life and so on. And I would say, without an exception, literally 100% of my students said their dream in life was to die for their country.
Yikes.
Yeah. And if you had asked a Japanese student that in 1930, he would have written the same thing.
Somebody ought to give him the Patton quote.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But this is the spirit. But in the classroom, I don't mean to suggest in the classroom that this doesn't reveal itself. They're hip students. They're watching Japanese pornography. They're interested in high fashion. They're doing their modern thing. They're modern kids, but they're trained from childhood to be little soldiers ready to die.
That's what the ancient Chinese secret is that they're just a bunch of fucking commies.
The ancient Chinese secret is that they all watch Japanese eel porn.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and if not horror movies, my Chinese students watched horror movies, and one of my favorite conversations was when they told me, with wonderful contempt, really a sneering contempt, that they could never watch an American horror movies because they weren't horrible enough. And that's so true. If you really, I don't happen to like that genre, but if you're into it, the Japanese can really scare the shit out of you in a way no American movie is as terrifying as a Japanese horror movie. It's simply true.
All the Japanese horror movies are just kind of like, look, here's a girl and we raped her, and I'm a monster and we raped her, and it's like, oh, okay. That's like not much of a story. That and like, how am I supposed to understand? I don't care about that shit. Speak English, bitch.
Well, I don't know. The only one that I watched is the famous The Ring. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only one I really. It's just I can't watch them. I don't know. I'm too Spanish. But anyway,
there's the guinea pig films. There's a film series called Guinea Pig where they just torture a woman for like an hour and a half. It's just a fake snuff film. And there's like 4 of those movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah, that I guess that right. There's a spectrum of lunacy, I suppose. Yeah, I haven't seen the snuff films, but I can well believe that. That's part of the psyche, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Brian's more of a horror guy. I'm not really big into horror. Like, my favorite horror movie is Alexandra's Project.
Oh, I don't know that.
It's a good one if you like psychological horror. It's an Australian movie from, I think, about 2003. Basically, it's about a man who comes home expecting that his family is going to be throwing a surprise birthday party for him, but instead, like, the house is completely cleared out, except for a videotape and a TV.
Surprise!
And he puts it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much worse than that, Bryden. Like he puts the videotape in, and the movie is just like it's of his wife. The tape is of his wife, and the rest of the movie is just him being psychologically tortured. Like it just ramps up ever so. I don't even look at like a plot a plot summary or whatever. Like just go watch it. It's really good.
I'll look for it. I'll look for it. But yeah, so I guess the point I was only making, I suppose, one point about the China experience, and that was that the Chinese are ramped up in a way that the Japanese were 30 years ago, and they're optimistic and they're curious. You know, like, oh, for example, this is quite literally the case. Every single one of my students in China came to America to Ivy League graduate schools. And I'm still in contact with the chancellor, who's retired now and lives in South Carolina. And we exchanged notes and so on. And he came to the same observation I did, and that was that in our naive stupidity, we thought, oh, lovely, you're going to the University of Chicago. But we realize now that they were all spies, every single one of them. They're sent to these Ivy League schools. The tuition's paid by the government. They report back to the government on what's going on in those classrooms, and then if they get jobs in the States, they're plants, and we see that now. And I was only over there a year, but as I say, this guy who was the chancellor of the university was over there, I guess 6 total, and really got around. I mean, he was, as a businessman, he was just simply on the go. So he had a great opportunity to really get involved. Anyway, and he confirmed exactly my thought. I just actually came up with this, a couple of years ago, realizing that, wait a minute, why were all these kids at Princeton and Brown and Harvard? How did that happen? They were middle-class kids, but where is this $100,000 a year tuition coming from? And then we, put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a small scale version of that going on in Europe, where the big dream of European integration was that like all these Poles and Bulgarians and whatnot would come to use the EU free market to move to London or wherever, and then they'd go back home and they'd be like, oh, it's so wonderful, we need to improve Poland and Bulgaria and make it progressive. And bring it into the 21st century. But instead what happened is like all these Poles went to London and they all told their family back home, oh my God, it sucks here. Like there's so much crime, it's expensive. You can't walk down the street without your phone getting stolen, which is a thing that happens in London. I went there a year ago and I was warned by a friend, like, don't walk out on the sidewalk holding your phone because someone will come up on a bicycle and just snatch it out of your hand.
Right.
Yeah, the Chinese, experience seems to be like an accelerated version of that.
Right.
But you also mentioned teaching in Saudi Arabia. What was Saudi Arabia,
Yes.
right? Because that's like one of like a lot of people know about Japan, but like Saudi Arabia isn't exactly known for its openness to the world.
No, that's right. Well, that was really a weird experience. I have to admit, I went over there. I was a history major in college, but I never studied anything about the Middle East, and so I really went over as an ignoramus. And initially, I went to Dhahran, which is on the east side, and then later I went to literally the other side, to Jeddah, which is a rather progressive, comparatively speaking, a progressive city. But Dhahran is really Aramco. That's the oil university system that was set up by the Americans back in the 30s. So you have the Aramco oil system, the refineries and all of this stuff. Then you had the oil and engineering university right next door, and that's where I taught, and I lived for 3 years. And it's really a dusty backwater. It's a rough place to live. It's not as reactionary as Riyadh. Riyadh is literally in the middle of the country and famously conservative and difficult for Westerners. And I've been there many times, but I've never worked there. In any case, so I was living on the campus, university campus, the teachers, it had been administered by Americans until about 1970. Now it's run entirely by the Saudis, and the teachers, the English teachers, that is, I would say were mainly Brits. Australians, yes, Americans, yes, but mainly Brits. And I guess all of it, well, not everybody, but 80% of us were over 50. And most of the Brits had lived abroad their entire lives. They were true expats. So they had been in Africa for 20 years. They'd been in India for 10 years. They'd been 20 years in Thailand and so on. So it was for me, a very different kind of experience, very international setting. And I was very intimidated, more so than I was in Watts, in fact. I didn't know what to make of it at all. And my brother had told me, I think I may have written a story about this. My brother had told me that I would be murdered there and that I mustn't take the job, and he was very hard. He described he said they were all terrorists and it would be very tough. And, oh my God, what are you doing? Why are you a fool to go there? And so on. And so this played in the back of my head for several days when I first arrived. And I had to walk about a half a mile from my place to the campus building where I was teaching. And it's about 105, 115 degrees every day. And of course I was leaving in the early morning, so it wasn't so bad, but then I had to walk back at lunchtime when it was really quite warm, and then home in the evening. Anyway, so I did a lot of walking. And that first week, I don't remember the exact day, but maybe the third or fourth day, I was followed home by a car. And so all of these things my brother had warned me about came through my head, and I was getting more and more paranoid and walking, and the car was driving parallel. It was obviously on the street. I was on the sidewalk, and it slowed to my pace. And all these and the windows were all tinted, and of course there are kidnappings there, and there are shootings, random shootings, and they can be directed at foreigners. You would read from time to time about a German businessman or something shot at an ATM, just out of the blue. Not a robbery, but probably some form of terrorism. In any case, so all these paranoid thoughts went through my mind as I walked, and I was walking for about 15 minutes. And finally, the car came to a stop, and the door flung open, and my students came piling out of the car to welcome me. And they insisted that I get into the car, and they would drive me home because it was so hot. So but the car, they had six, by the way, it's strictly sexually segregated, right? So they're all boys. In any case, I said, well, the car is too crowded. Forget it. I'll just walk. It's fine. Oh, no. And they jumped out of the car, and they stayed on the sidewalk. And then the guys drove me home and then came back and picked up their friends. But the point is that the students were incredibly generous and kind and sweet and normal. I mean, just normally boisterous, very boisterous, a lot like Catholic kids in the 50s, I would say. That kind of pent-up male energy. They were rambunctious. They were obnoxious, but they were never rude or aggressive in that way, the Americans. I feel
you're just kids being kids,
they were kids being kids. That's right. And they could be tough. I mean, very rowdy. I'm sure, as everybody knows. I used to teach as a matter of fact, at a Jewish high school in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And it was a great shock of recognition because the boys there were just like the Arab kids. Very, very, and like the Armenians, as a matter of fact, that same kind of physicality, that kind of wrestling kind of physicality. But in any case, I liked teaching there. And then I went to a military compound in Jeddah, and I taught at was the National Guard. And all of our students were really from just north of Yemen. So this was a rural, mountainous Saudi Arabia, really backwards. And the students were incredibly hostile to me. And they hated, just the idea of these Americans, these heathens, these pagans, teaching them. It was tough. I mean, really tough. Because the boys at the university were rather sophisticated, really. They had parents, not all of them, but some of them had parents with PhDs from America. you know, the boys who were following me home that day were driving a $30,000 Mustang, and so it was that kind of setting. But on the other side of town, at the military academy, the kids were being put into the army, you know, against their will. They were being conscripted, and this was part of the king's anti-terrorism movement to get boys off the street, literally, to keep them from being brought into the gangs. So they didn't want to be there. They were not academic types by any means, you know. So they joined the army. They work out in the sun all day. They do push-ups and all this kind of crap, and then they have to come into this classroom and study this stupid language. And it's required because I was working for Raytheon, and so the missile system would be run by these students when they graduated, you know, from the academy, and they needed to be able to read the manuals and so on in English.
Not accidentally blow something up.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like the students back at the other side of the country, in the end, the students were just kids. I mean, they were, you know, you could, I don't know how, I can't really explain, this is true in any school anywhere in the world, why one teacher is liked and another teacher is not liked, or why one student likes you and another one doesn't. But if you could win them over, they were incredibly nice, you know. And I would have students, they would come to my office, for example, and they would always hold their hand over their heart. They would stand at the door until they were invited in, and, you know, they were just so polite and rather decent. But the environment was tough. The generals and the whole military regime, it was something like Borat, really. It was a clown show. It was a Marx Brothers movie. The absurdity, the insanity, the lunacy of the directives. You know, it's really Catch-22 is conservative compared to the lunacy that we experience. For example, we had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and then drive to the military compound. And we would arrive at 5 o'clock, and then we would screw around in our office for an hour, and then the boys would be marched in. And they had already been, you know, on a parking lot duty doing push-ups and all this crap. And they would be exhausted. They hadn't eaten at 6 in the morning. And, you know, hello, boys, how are you? Good morning, you know, and there I am. And they're dead. I mean, they're just simply dead. They haven't eaten. They haven't had time to go to the bathroom. They're exhausted. And this is going to go on all day long. They're going to be with me, you know, for 6 hours. And my job was to keep them awake, literally. My job was to keep them awake. And there were officers who would wander around supervising. You know, and if they looked in the window and saw one of the boys sleeping, they would blame, you know, the teacher. The teacher would be fired on the spot, right on the spot. And it was very tough. And these military guys were monsters. They were some cliche out of a war movie. They were screaming sergeants. They were raging lunatics, sadists, really. And so you had to deal with that. You had to deal with the students, and you had to deal with this insanity, for example, of arriving at 5, going to your office, and then at 6 being told that the students wouldn't be coming that day. So you would have to sit in your office all day long. The students, there would have been some incident in the dorm that night, and they were all on lockdown, and we would sit in our room, but we couldn't use the light. They would turn the lights off to save electricity. We would sit in the dark in our office all day long for 6 hours. That kind of thing, you know, and you would just think, what? And you simply wouldn't believe it, you know, of course, but soon enough you get acclimated to just the inanity of it all, just the madness. And anyway, and again, these are all boys. The teachers are all men. A lot of the men are divorced. They're lonely. They've been on the expat circuit for years. A lot of them, and they're making alcohol in their bathtubs, you know, and drinking themselves to death. 55 years old men who, you know, eat spaghetti and wipe their fingers on their shirts. They're really degraded, degenerate people who,
Yeah. Don't forget about the bathtub alcohol, because alcohol is illegal in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely, that's right. And so, some of these guys, not all of them, but some of them weren't really true alcoholics. So it was a very tough environment. And these were guys also. These were not, I could say in America, basically all the teachers, are kind of feminized, if you know what I mean. I mean, there's a kind of softness. You're teaching in a school, you like kids, you're all this. But that was not true of these expat teachers at all. I mean, these were guys who would they would headbutt you if they disagree. In the hallway, you would say the wrong thing, and it would be like a soccer fight. Boom. Some Australian guy would headbutt at a colleague and knock him down, and because he used too much chalk in the classroom. There's no chalk in my room, and there would be a fist fight. So so it was a very it was tough. It was weird. It was weird, but Jeddah was kind of fascinating in its own way, and I don't know what to say. But it was from Saudi that I went to China. So I went from there directly to China, and I taught in China, in Wenzhou, China, which is 4 hours south of Shanghai. And it was an industrial town. You probably don't know the name. It's not a well-known city. I had never heard of it. And we were part of this phenomenon that occurred in the years that I was there. And that is that almost every American university now has a campus in China. And so I was teaching at Kane University of New Jersey, the State University of New Jersey, named after the governor, Tom Kane. Anyway, Kane University, ironically, the Chinese premier had graduated from Kane University. And so when as a young man, and then when he gained prominence, he pulled some strings and he got the license that was required from the Communist Party to invite this American university to open in Wenzhou, where he was from. And since then, UC Berkeley is there, Duke University is there. They have campuses all over the place. Anyway, and so I was there at Wenzhou Kane was the official name. I was there the first year, and we did not have a campus. We were located on the campus of Wenzhou University temporarily. They were building a new campus for Wenzhou Kane, and I have to say, in many ways, it was a good experience. Although I had diarrhea for the entire year. Very, very hard to eat. The bottled water was all recycled water. The caps were, falsified. You would think that you were buying fresh water, but you were sick. You couldn't drink the tap water, of course.
Not the greatest restaurant inspection team there.
Yeah, exactly. You would think, for example, my wife is Japanese, and she and I would go to a Japanese restaurant thinking, aha, we'll get some clean, water here. They'll put it in the ramen. But we would be sick to death after going. Horrible. And so that was difficult. I mean, I must say, not enough to whine about, but it was just part of the reality of being there. And there was no sun. No, I didn't see a blue sky the entire year. The pollution was so thick. It was really like being in Pittsburgh in 1910 or something like that. Very tough.
Just smog everywhere.
Smog everywhere. Yeah, thick, just basically a gray cloud, like a high, not low cloud, but like a high fog year round. I mean, literally year round. And then I didn't have a car. I mean, we could take taxis, of course, and I did. But to save money, occasionally I would take the city bus. And the city bus would seat, let's say 40. There were maybe 40 seats on a city bus. Well, there would be 300 people on the bus. And maybe I would get a chair, maybe not. But I mean, if I did, then other passengers would come and sit on me. And so I might have, 3 women on my lap. And it was wild. And there would be fist fights. Very often, not often, but occasionally there would be a scene, the driver would close the door on people trying to get in, and it's a scene like out of, out of Mexico City in the 1950s or something. You've got half the people hanging out the doors, and you've got chickens, and just madness. and then there was another stop. You think, why is he stopping? And the bus, there are already 400 people on this bus, and he would stop, and then 20 more people would somehow cling to the door somehow, and someone would get angry and then come over and punch the driver, and there would be an altercation, and it was wild. It was like the frontier.
It sounds like I spent some time in the Philippines, and they've got like these the public transportation in a lot of Philippine cities is the jeepney, which is basically just a converted. It's basically just like a converted minivan or jeep, and these things are always teeming with people, always, and they also have a tendency to explode. So.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see explosions, but I wouldn't have been surprised if I had. I mean, it was just wild.
Yeah. And your experience sounds pretty consistent. We had one of our other authors, Brian Eckert, on the show a while back. He taught in China for a while, and he described the experience of regularly being elbowed in the nuts by old Chinese women.
Yes. Right.
Just seems like just seems like an odd and antisocial place.
Oh yes. Well, I went to a museum, and a woman climbed on my back so she could get a closer look. And to this day I feel guilty because instead of sort of being cool, I elbowed her off of me. I was so annoyed. But anyway, there's no respect for personal space. I mean, it's just mob scene. But not hostile. I mean, really not hostile. Nothing really to complain about at a certain level. It's just a certain kind of urban life that just doesn't exist anymore in America, which maybe is too bad. I mean, our lives are so antiseptic, and I don't know. I kind of like a little third world action, just to.
Yeah, I mean, you get used to it after a while, and I mean, when I remember going back to the U.S. after the Philippines and just being like shocked and weirded out by the streets of Chicago being like empty in comparison to like any Philippine city. I mean, to be fair, it was also October, but still, it was kind of a disconcerting feeling not having to elbow my way through a crowd or watch my pockets and watch for pickpockets.
Right, that's right. Yeah, exactly. You feel it is disconcerting. It's right.
But
yeah, so that was a good experience. So now I'm back in Japan, but I'm not back for teaching. I retired. So it's a glorious place to retire. I mean, it's probably one of the great kept secrets of the globe, because Japan is an incredibly cheap place to live. It has a reputation. Yeah, that's exactly. Really is always the reply. I think that in the 60s or 70s, Americans would come to Japan and they would stay at the Hilton, and they would go on the 26th floor and have a steak and get $100 bill, and that reputation permeated the travel world. Japan is expensive. Japan is exotic. Japan is expensive. And this is just simply repeated so often, so that what has never really been made clear is that the prices simply never went up here. So, as I said, I taught here in 1985. The teacher salaries are exactly the same as today as they were then. There's nothing has changed. Rents are the same. Food is the same. It just froze. That depression that occurred after I left simply became a permanent thing. Unlike our collapse in 2008, where there was that incredible collapse, but I notice now in real estate in any case, it's really rebounded. I mean, houses that were selling for $200,000 in 2008 are now $400,000. I notice. But
the economy recovered in the U.S. Up until a certain thing happened this year, but it didn't recover in Japan.
No, it never did. And so, for example, I live in Tokyo, and I live in a terrific place, and the rents are about $1,000 a month. But a comparable city like San Francisco or New York, it'd be $3,000, maybe $4,000. It's a huge difference to live in a magnificent city. I mean, clearly, top 10 cities of the world, and the rents are what they were 50 years ago. Same thing with food. In New York, I like New York very much. I lived in New Jersey, but I would go over to see plays and stuff. And I just could not manage a lunch for less than $25 unless I had a hot dog on the street or something. Even if I just went to get a pastrami sandwich, it would, be $16.95 and tax and a tip and a drink, and it's $25. But here, I could easily get lunch for 600 yen, which is $6. A very decent lunch. And then
that's basically like second world. That's like Eastern European prices.
Yeah,
I was in
exactly.
Eastern Europe for 3 years, and it's pretty cheap here.
It is. I can pay more. I mean, they'd be happy to offer me a cocktail and so on. But I mean, if you go for their fixed prices, that's what they have here, by the way. Is instead of a la carte, it's all fixed. So you pay. I said 600. That would be on the low side. I feel very comfortable at $12. I feel that's a very decent price. I don't want to pay more. And then I think $20 is astronomical, and I don't want to pay that much. But in America, like even last time I was in LA at the airport and I got a Caesar salad, and I paid $15, just something absurd like that. Something served in a paper cup, Anyway, but I don't have to tell you that,
But yeah, how do the Japanese react to you as a foreigner? Because the impression I've gotten, I've only been through Japan twice through the on transfers at the airport. The impression I get from the Japanese always is polite hostility, where they'll be courteous and whatnot to you, but they deep down they really don't want you around. And you've kind of joked about this in some of your writing. I think in Bluff City, I'm paraphrasing from memory, but you kind of made a joke about if you tell the Japanese immigration you want to stay, if you don't tell them you're leaving as soon as possible, they get nervous.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I feel that this is true possibly in throughout Asia. They have highly sophisticated customs relating to the treatment of strangers. This was true in Saudi Arabia also, and I've read that. I can't remember the title offhand, but the kite flying novel about Afghanistan. Do you remember that?
I vaguely remember that, but I can't remember the title.
But anyway, that story revolves around the guest stranger relationship, and I think it's very similar here. In the story about Afghanistan, it's based on the idea that the host is responsible for you and will do anything for you, and so the novel illustrates that through this.
It's like the ancient Greek concept.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So welcoming people in, taking care of the stranger, sharing your wealth, of course, everything, and maybe even doing without food, and so that your guests can feel full and so on. Well, I think that Japan is very similar to that. They're very good at making you feel welcome, and they're very good at saying goodbye. They're very good. You don't have that American breakdown of all the. Really, I think we've lost all of these kind of what would I say? Kind of formulae of treatment. One example, I guess, is my students in America. They leave the office and they say later. Whereas the Saudi students would put their hand on their heart and they would say, as a formula, literally all the students would say the same thing. They put their hand on their heart and they say, is there anything I can get for you? That's how they say goodbye. And so I think the Japanese are similar to that. They have formulaic expressions of welcome, and they formulaic expressions of goodbye. If you see kids, I've witnessed this many, many times. I'll be sitting at the patio in front of a McDonald's in the morning having coffee, and a little kid will come, and he's obviously waiting for his teacher. Another little kid comes. I'm talking about little 6-year-olds. They're in a little uniform, and they got a little yellow hat, which they wear when they go on a field trip. And the next kid comes, And as they arrive, they greet each other. And literally every little kid says exactly the same thing. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And there'll be 50 kids arrive and they all say good morning. Whereas, if an American group were coming, one kid would say good morning, another one would say fuck you, another one would say what's up, another one would say, hey dickhead. And, there would be no, uniformity. Consistency, thank you. But here there is, and it's because it's learned. They learn how to greet you. They learn how to make you feel welcome. But they don't know what to say to you if you say you're staying. That's disconcerting for them. Well, they can't compute that. Well, what do you mean you're staying? They would. Yeah, that's very nerve-wracking. And interestingly, I think that's basically, as a generalization, I think that's true. That the idea of people moving in. I think that, by the way, this is not just true of Japanese and foreigners. I read this fascinating story about there's a depopulation situation occurring in Japan. So a lot of the little villages don't have enough people. The elementary schools are empty because there are not enough children. And they're literally giving away properties and trying to get people to move out of Tokyo and back to these rural places because the parents die and then there's nobody to live in the house, kind of thing. And there are all these stories about how the city people are treated when they go to these little villages. And the story that I just read was about this woman who bought this property and moved into the house and so on and so on. And she put her garbage out. She saw a collection of garbage bags at the end of the block. And so she put her bag out there. And at the end of the day, all the bags had been taken except hers. And so she couldn't understand why wasn't her bag taken. So she checked around and she was told by a neighbor that you have to join the garbage truck pickup club, in order to have it picked up. You have to. You got to join the trash removal mafia. Exactly. And so then she tried to do it and she was told that there are no new spots. No, you'll have to take your garbage to the next town and get in your car and drive down there, but we're not going to take it. We only take 15 members every year, and we already have 15 members. And she finally ended up selling the property and moving back to Tokyo because she couldn't tolerate being snubbed at the grocery store, and they refused to fix her car when she took it to the garage because they didn't know her, and they weren't, just all this kind of really kind of abuse. Passive aggressive. Yeah, really small town. Abuse. It's the kind of, I think that, my father told me about growing up in rural New York State, and I suppose his little town might have been like that, but that was, 100 years ago. But I think it's like that, today here.
I'm just thinking that'd be I'm imagining the whole town is run by women. Yeah,
sure it is. Sure it is. And they can be very, they're into, what is that Amish custom of, snubbing, not snubbing, but, refusing to speak to somebody, you like that movie Witness where I think the Jehovah's Witnesses use the term disfellowship. Yes. Right. Exactly that. So here that can happen to you. And it will happen to you if they don't know who you are, if you're not an insider, you've got a problem. On the other hand, if they want you, I'll give you an example. I live in a condo building. And if I were to come as a friend, like if I knew somebody living here and I were to enter the building or enter the elevator, I doubt that anybody would speak to me. I mean, very, very unlikely. But because I know they know I live here, I get greeted. And if I were to disregard that greeting, it would be seen as an insult. It would be taken very deeply and personally. So I get a greeting, good morning, and then I share my thought, good morning, and then, we're fine. But if they don't know who you are, they don't say good morning to strangers here. But that's not done the way we do in America, walking down the street with a smile and saying hi to everybody. Here, they're much more like the French, they think you're stupid if you smile, for one thing. They think that's, that you must be the town idiot wandering around the street with a smile. So that's something that irritates me about America, and kind of why I'm glad to,
be in Eastern Europe. Like people don't smile here unless they're actually happy about something.
Right,
No,
right.
like if I were to go around, I'm in Serbia right now. If I were to go around with a smile on my face, people would think I'm mentally ill.
Yeah, yeah. And they think the same thing here.
Well, I don't know, Matt. Maybe people in America are just happy to be American and not be in Serbia. Did you ever think of that?
That's probably true.
I remember an anecdote like 10 years ago. Starbucks was opening franchises in Moscow, and the franchise owners were complaining that the Russian Starbucks workers would not smile, and the thinking was like, I'm just a barista making minimum wage. Why should I be smiling? Why should I be happy?
Yeah, that's true.
They also complain about how if someone at Starbucks, like if the Russian Starbucks got a promotion, they'd like stop working as hard. But again, the Russians were like, well, he got a promotion. Like that's the whole point. You're not supposed to be slavering when you get a promotion. Like that is your time to kind of kick back and relax.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right.
Americans just have this like really weird attitude about these kinds of things.
It's not weird. It's the attitude that makes the greatest country in the world.
You're one to talk, Bryden. You're never happy.
I'm not
You
happy
fit in perfect here.
I'm not happy because of deep fucking existential issues and shit, and because I gotta put up with people like you and your negative attitudes towards the greatest country in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So now
have fun with that.
Now say God bless America 50 times, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm not saying it 50 times.
You gotta say at least one time.
Okay, God bless America.
All right, 49 more times. You gotta do it for each state.
No.
But it's the okay.
Every state. No, I don't know. God should not bless all of the states. Okay, some of the states don't deserve that.
All right, so do it. Just do it a total of 48 times. We'll leave New York and California out of this.
All right, God bless America. God bless America. God bless America. God bless America. There, that's all you're getting.
I can't count how many times that was because I went to public school here in America, but I don't think you're anywhere close.
That was 40. That was 48.
You probably got all the good states in there. I mean,
yeah, like all two of them.
There's more. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me. It's yeah, whatever. But anyway, the kind of we almost forgot about this. Let's talk about Bluff City, since that's the reason we have David on here. Book is coming out this Friday, August 21st. David, do you want to talk a bit about Bluff City and kind of sell it to the audience? Why buy this book? It's so awesome.
Okay, I will. Well, the title comes from is a nickname actually from Memphis, Tennessee, where I'm from. And Memphis, rather famously, is on the Mississippi, and just because of its location, it's called Bluff City. But I'm intrigued by the double meaning of bluff and bluffing and that kind of idea that kind of animates in some way my writing, I suppose. I'm not sure if this is it's hard to talk about your own writing objectively, but I try to write with a sense of irony or an appreciation of double meanings and double associations and this kind of thing. I suppose in my writing about travel, I try to write, certainly a kind of good side, bad side kind of thing, a kind of balanced view, I suppose. I hope I don't harangue and rant and things like this. I certainly try not to. The first half of the book is poetry, and a lot of my poems are about my travels and my teaching, but also a lot about Memphis, a lot about growing up in Memphis. I was born in 1955 in New York, but my parents moved to Memphis in 1961, and so I was in and out of Memphis, more or less until my parents passed away. And Memphis was, it's a kind of a fascinating town. When I was young, I saw it. I was a bit of a snob, and I thought, oh, New York and Chicago and, California, these are the great places on earth. But I've come to, really more fully appreciate in my later years, that Memphis was really the center of the world for about 15 years. It was the music capital of the world. What an odd thing to happen to such a really kind of a provincial town. It was really an ag city. The Union Planters Bank, if you recognize that name from a Tennessee Williams play or a William Faulkner novel. The big money in Memphis was not manufacturing or industrial. It was agricultural. The families had cotton lands in Arkansas or in Mississippi and so on. And we had the city had this kind of garden center, which was made up primarily of these old WASP families, a kind of mossy world of grand houses and deeply disturbed kind of people. And I was certainly not part of that. Talking about being an outsider, talking about Japan, I came down and I was a Yankee the whole time. Even today, if I were to go to Memphis and get my hair cut, the barber is very likely to ask me, what's a Yankee like you doing down here? They can hear it in your accent, of course. So I was a Yankee all my life in Memphis, and very much an outsider. And then Memphis also, although it's a frontier town and never as snotty and snobby as Nashville, Memphis was famous for being on the Mississippi. It was famous for its whorehouses and frontier kind of toughness, really, until the 20th century. So the city doesn't have great airs, to high society or anything like that. But still, it was a very class-conscious society. When I was a boy, we were lower middle class. You didn't move from one class to another. There was rigidity. So there was segregation racially, which people are obsessed with. But
so it was kind of like with the class. It was kind of like a Flannery O'Connor novel. Yeah,
exactly. It was that's right. And there were rigidities. There were ways that you could move from one class to another, and that's rather complicated. I was not an adult in Memphis. I left to go to college, and I really never lived in Memphis again as an adult. But my parents stayed, and so of course I visited all the time. And so I'm very aware that I lived in Memphis. It sounds so corny and almost embarrassed to admit this, but I see it as a kind of a golden period. I see it as almost like a paradise. Memphis was a beautiful city. Talking about the roughness today in American cities, when Martin Luther King was killed in Memphis, we had no rioting or any kind of activity like this. It was really a city of you could almost say martial discipline. There was our mayor was named Mayor Loeb. He owned a chain of Loeb laundry centers and Loeb barbecue shops, just a kind of a dynamic businessman type, like Iacocca or maybe even like Trump. But he issued an order. He said if there was anybody on the street past 6 o'clock at night, they would be shot on sight. There would be no looting because if people would be shot, he told the police to aim at their heads. There wouldn't be any of that.
Damn.
And there wasn't any. I mean, believe me. Detroit went up in flames. Newark went up in flames, as everybody knows, famously. But not in Memphis. And this is fascinating. I mean, it was two cities. It was almost like Cambodia or like a colonial nation. Something like, as I say, like Cambodia. I have had friends doing business in Cambodia, and they talk about this kind of old colonial atmosphere. Well, Memphis was like that. It was segregated racially, and we were aware of that. But ironically, unlike the segregation I experienced in LA when I taught in Watts, where people in Beverly Hills call the police if a black man walks in the yard to deliver a FedEx package. They call the Beverly Hills police and say there's a black man in my yard. In Memphis, everybody had black people. We were all raised around blacks because the whole city, although segregated at night by the fact that people went home, everybody had blacks in their houses, either or in the laundries or in the shops or in the garage or anyway. So the point is that although we were not upper class and so on, everybody, like Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter, all these people lived in a biracial world. The South was not segregated in the way we think of it as segregated, meaning that there was no Congress between the peoples. There was. And my best friend in school was black, and I walked with him every day. And he went off to his house, and one turned right, and I turned left. But we were great pals. So for me, it was a kind of a wonderful childhood. It was, we didn't lock our house, we didn't lock the cars. My mother would leave the car running in the parking lot, and she would go shopping and come back out. We would sit in the back of the car. We all drove bicycles. None of us had a bicycle lock. It was unthinkable that we would lock anything. So for me, I think this is truly a life that's gone. It's absolutely past.
It was kind of an idyllic childhood.
You're
talking about, and the way you're talking about it kind of reminds me of like David Lynch, and how a lot of his work, or at least a lot of his early work, kind of focused on American decline. Because he had that idyllic upbringing in the 50s, and then he watched it all go to pot, and then you see that in movies like Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks.
Yes, right, absolutely, that's right. And I don't mean to suggest when I say this that I was happy. That's not what that's hard to separate the two. I mean, on the one hand, I had a normal childhood, and of course there were all these little traumas and unhappinesses and disappointments and so on. But what I mean is when I look back, I can just see that there was this it was a moment in American life, and it wasn't. I don't really believe, as is argued, that this was just experienced by certain people or something like that. I don't think that that's true at all. I think that it was just a magic time, and I think that what I notice in my travels is that other countries go through this phase, like Japan, for example. Japan is an incredibly peaceful place. The idea of street crime. No, I mean, it's just that women go out drinking and partying and walk home at 1 o'clock in the morning. They're not worried that someone's going to, assault them. This is unthinkable. And all the Western women I know, all notice this and talk about it. They find it enchanting. It's remarkable. So this can be experienced. It is experienced, in places. I would imagine that that's true of Eastern Europe, but maybe I'm wrong.
It definitely. Well, in many places, like Tbilisi. I lived in Tbilisi, Georgia, for about a year and a half, and there was this went viral online. There was an incident that happened actually a couple of blocks down from my apartment where just some crazy woman came up to some 5-year-old kid and stabbed him in the face. She got caught and arrested and charged and all that. But people were all just why wasn't anyone doing anything? They were just staring. It's because street crime is absolutely non-existent in Tbilisi, so people just didn't know what to do. At least part of the reason why you don't get a lot of crime in places like Georgia is because the Caucasus is a very clannish place. It's not that different from the Balkans, actually. And as a result, people are less willing to kind of just start shit with each other because, if you start shit, with someone else, well, their family members might come after you. So that, a way, just kind of helps to keep the peace. And they also have that, like you were talking about earlier, with the hospitality culture. That's a very big thing in the Caucasus. They're very gracious to outsiders.
Yeah. So back to the what I guess I'm talking a lot and I'm not saying very much, but I just simply wanted to say that this was this magical time in my life. But I think objectively speaking, it was a remarkable moment, and it comes to me, again and again and again. I'll read something and recognize. Once again, I was just listening to an interview, by the way, with Robert Plant, and he was talking about Memphis, going to Memphis when he was a young musician, and Led Zeppelin. He met Elvis Presley and so on. And he was in and out of Memphis quite a lot. He was very interested in Muddy Waters and as I said, Elvis and all the great blues singers and so on. And this was just simply a unique time. Of course, it's totally gone now. It's one of the we all, of course, everybody appreciates the civil rights movement and integration. I'm not suggesting anything otherwise. But one of the things that went with it one of the things that has disappeared is that vibrant culture. Memphis does not have a vibrant, and Mississippi, of course, no longer has that agricultural world that fed the blues. That's gone, with modern living and modern integration and social mobility and so on. I mean, it really killed the culture, is what I want to say. And so I realized I was really privileged to have seen really the end of it, because I arrived more or less at the end of the glory years. So by the time we got to Memphis in '61, the great recording years of the '50s are over. At the record I used to go to Overton Park Shell and listen to some of the blues singers, though. And B.B. King was still in and out of Memphis. Elvis, of course, was a very major presence in the city. I didn't personally see him, but he was there. And of course, we had Soul Train, which was the famous all-black radio show that became a television series when I was a kid. And that was all singing and dancing, not blues, but soul music and so on. And Al Green was from Memphis, and Isaac Hayes, and I don't know, just a remarkable time in this very funny little town, which other than the music really is not distinguished for anything. It's just a fluke in history, like Florence or Salzburg or something, just one of those odd little miracles. But one of my big complaints, by the way, when I taught in Watts, which they were almost most of my students were black, was that all the black teachers and white teachers, for that matter, all of us were required to study Spanish to get a license, a bilingual consciousness license, a cultural, what do I want to say, awareness license to continue teaching in the public schools. But ironically, the Latino teachers or Filipino teachers, we had all these foreign teachers coming to LA because they couldn't get the Americans to teach there anymore. And not one of them ever had to take any kind of a black culture awareness course. So they would come to Watts and teach these kids, and they would not understand at all anything about black culture, anything about black music. They didn't have to learn about John Coltrane or anything like that. They were allowed to assume that there is no culture. They were allowed to assume that it's all just rap and ghetto violence or something like this, which I think is a disgrace. I think that it's a terrible failure of our educational system that we put so much emphasis on bilingualism and almost ignore American culture. It's absurd.
I question the utility of bilingualism. I mean, like I got a bit of that when I was growing up. Like, my high school offered Spanish and French as foreign language electives. I wanted to take French because that's just me. But my parents and teachers were like, you need to speak Spanish because it's going to be like a second language in America. And it's like, no, it's not. Nobody in upstate New York speaks Spanish, and the ones who do, the handful of people who do speak English. Bilingualism is like an obsession for like the upper middle class. It's like they spout out these statistics like Americans don't learn other languages, blah blah blah. People generally learn languages when they have to, like it's a necessity. Like a European might know several languages because, well, look at Europe. It's a bunch of small countries doing trade with each other. But like the average American, like, is not going to really interface with foreign language speakers on a regular basis. They're starting to do this with Chinese now. It's like, oh, you need to learn Chinese because it's the most spoken language in the world. No, you don't. The average American is not going to be, interacting with Chinese speakers on anything resembling a regular basis. And the Chinese who are traveling abroad for business or school or whatever, they already know English. English is already the default language, trade language of the world. Like even in Eastern Europe, in most places, like the young people speak reasonably fluent English. Like in Tbilisi, they speak good English. In Ukraine, not so much, but you can still they still speak English. Armenia, they speak English. Serbia, they speak English. That's just how things go. And it's a sort of like what you said, David. It's kind of like a surface level mentality where like learn the language but don't learn the culture.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that it's really well, superficial is a good way to put it. But I think that I don't know. I just think that we privilege this bilingualism, as you say, and we completely ignore our own country, our own background. You said you're from upper state New York. My dad's from Buffalo. That's a fascinating. He's our German. Lohrey is a German name. All of those cultures that make up America are totally ignored. They would never think of having a course on to foreign teachers or for anybody. Foreign students for that matter. All those Mexican American kids in LA, they don't take any courses on American culture. Which is one reason why there's probably so much racism in LA. Terrible racism between the Latinos and the blacks. One reason is that they're never taught to appreciate each other. They don't know anything about each other. I don't think they don't have a jazz appreciation course, which they should. Anyway, so I grew up in Memphis, and then I went out to California, and it was kind of mind blowing. I mean, I just remember so well arriving at 18 and just thinking it was the paradise. I just thought it was a fabulous place. So I went to UC Berkeley and then went on to LA to teach. LA was kind of having a bit of a renaissance of a kind. It was a very strange, a good time to be in LA, really. They were trying to revive LA. Downtown LA had been abandoned, like downtown Memphis and many American downtowns. So it turned into a shithole. It was just a raggedy ass dump. Abandoned, completely abandoned. And today, of course, it's just been turned over to the homeless. But there was a time when I was living in LA. I was not living downtown, but there was an attempt to revive, and they had a Shakespeare theater down there. And my favorite restaurant was called Gorky's, a funny little Russian place that flourished for a couple of years, and then all these places went under because Angelenos prefer to go to West Side, Beverly Hills and Westwood and all those chic places. But anyway, so I fell in love with LA, and I lived there for about 20 years. I just thought it was. But again, like Memphis, I feel like I was there in its heyday, because I think the population there tripled in the course of the time that I was there. I went from having, I was still there when you could drive, a little bit like Tarantino's movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I was there at that time. You could drive through the roads, but today, of course, it's all bumper to bumper with uninsured drivers, and it's a kind of urban hell. But I thought I was there at a great time. But really, the end. It was the last of the glory years, which is kind of a shame. And it was a very difficult. And as I said, the school I taught in had been Jewish. It had been the feeder school for Fairfax High School, the very famous school that then was a feeder for UCLA. But when I was there, it was, I think, when it was Jewish, I'm saying in the 60s, I think they had 1,000 students. And when I was there, we had 5,000 students in the same building, the same number of toilets, the same number of classrooms. And in order to accommodate all these immigrants, they had to put all the students on rotation so that, all the students were never in the building at the same time. You had an A group, a B group, C and D, and one group was always off campus, and the vacations were continuing. And anyway, and all of LA schools are like this. They're just these mad beehives of overcrowding and squalor and just disgraceful. LA had one of the great public school systems in the world, and it had really been a beacon of public education, California. Now I think it's down about the same level as Mississippi. So very, very poor system. And, they have no money because they spend, well, going back to bilingual, they spend so much money on lunatic things. My principal, for example, when I was there, went with a group of principals to Georgia, as a matter of fact, and to Armenia. They visited the country of origin of all of our students. So they would go to Korea, and they would go to Armenia, and they would go to, I don't know, and these, what do you call those? Just time wasting, money wasting trips. This kind of constantly being sent on trips. 50 teachers, they all fly first class and spend a fortune, and the district would throw money into that. Meanwhile, the teachers don't have any books, and there's no chalk. It's a cliche setup, but very much true. Very, very,
so
very true.
They all basically vote themselves a foreign overseas vacation, while the actual school has no money for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would. They were constant. Our principal, and I'm not saying he was a bad principal, by the way, but they were on campus. I would say half the year, literally half the year. The other half they were off. He had a meeting. They would call it a meeting. These are these 5-hour lunches, and then the system was set up so that the teachers and the administrators, you would go to school at night, and the only way to make your salary go up, was to add degrees. So many teachers had 2 or 3 MAs or something like this. Well, the administrators were the same. They would license some goofball operation in Nevada to offer a PhD for principals to spend, 6 weeks for 3 years, and they would get a PhD and fake degree in education. And they all have these PhDs, and of course their salaries would go up 25% because of that. And then they would teach in a year-round school like mine, and the teachers were off 3 months like regular schools, but just at a different, not necessarily in the summer. You might be on A track and be off for the summer. You might be on B track and be off September, October, and November. But the principals were there all year, hence their salaries would be 25% up. I mean, perhaps they deserve this, but I'm talking about principals, making $150,000 a year, and the teachers are making 30. The whole system is, it's a racket. But it's a typical bureaucracy. Nothing shocking about that. It's just a racket. But as I say, there are all these district-paid trips that were, simply absurd. Really, simply absurd. The principal had no business going to Armenia. And the point is that he would go, but of course not alone. He was the only school in the district that had Armenian students, but they would send 25 teachers with them, or principals with them, assistant principals.
They sent 25 teachers to Yerevan, and they just spent all that time eating dolma and staring at statues.
Yeah, that's right. And Vietnam, they would go to Vietnam. They would literally go to every country represented in the district. Well, in a city like LA, there are probably 50 countries represented. So, one group is going to Venezuela, one group is going to Vietnam, another group is going to China, another group is going to Korea. And this is, millions of dollars. But, I read recently an article about the corrupt mayor of Detroit. And very similarly, evidently, I can't remember his name right now, but the very famous one I think he was a mayor of Detroit for maybe 10 years after the riots, back in from maybe 65 to 75 or something like that. He was a notorious corrupt guy. And he would take the whole, city council and all the entourage, this whole thing on fly first class and go to Nigeria on some African-American heritage trip. Spend millions of dollars of city money on some heritage vacation. Spend 6 weeks over there dancing and drinking. I mean, that's what's going on in our country.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I I like how Bluff City kind of goes into this based on your own experience. It's kind of like the absurdity of not just the whole teaching profession and how it operates, but like your observations on what is basically the decline of America from your perspective, the decline from your idyllic childhood in Memphis, to like where America culture is now. One way you kind of refocus this, the version of Bluff City that that we'll be publishing that you gave to me, you added a story you published in Terror House recently called Imperialism, which is about smashing statues, kind of tying it all up in a nice neat bow.
Right. Yeah, that not to tie everything back to Memphis, but interestingly, Memphis was one of the big centers of monument destruction. They went downtown and took down all the statues of the Confederate generals. And,
they went beyond that. They're going to be digging up like Confederate graves.
Oh, incredible, unbelievable, shocking. I'm simply shocked.
Disturbing the Dead is usually a prelude to horrible things in like a horror movie.
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing good about this at all. Yes, and I don't write about it. I don't write really essays. I don't really want to. I don't want to preach or rant or anything like this. The story that I wrote, Imperialism, based on the taking down of a statue, which did not actually happen as far as I know. I was speculating, or how would I say, fantasizing on a bunch of thugs taking down Churchill's statue, a man that I happen to admire. But I think, just the idea of this symbol of greatness, right? And it's not as though this symbol of greatness is destroyed by great people. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how I see it. In other words, my story, I made up these hoodlums, kind of British soccer bums, the kind of guys who harass old ladies and knock them over the head and take their money, kind of thugs. And they're, urinating on the statue once they've broken it down and so on. And my point being that there's nothing being offered in the play. One thing, I would, not that I myself would want this, but I could perfectly understand. We're going to take down the statue of this Confederate general, and we're going to put up a statue celebrating the Black Brigade that fought in World War II, the Tuskegee Flyers or something like that. So, but there's nothing offered. You're going to get a pile of shit to replace the monument, is what I'm trying to say. And this is what I feel has to be mentioned. I think that it cannot, people should not accept the idea that to defend the monument is to defend the Confederacy. That's so absurd. None of us know anything about the Confederacy. None of us participated in it. This is purely a theoretical thing, really. You're not really talking about a loyalty to anything. The idea that to smear people who defend monuments by calling them racist is absurd. We have nothing in it. I have nothing in that damn thing, but I know that if you go with a knife into an art museum and you slash a painting, that nothing has been accomplished. This is nihilism. And to replace it, as I say, with a pile of shit just strikes me as being a mistake. And I can't see how anybody could argue otherwise. But I'd be willing to hear the other argument. I would love to hear it.
Well, what they're going to end up doing, what they're going to end up doing is like none of these statues are coming back. Like not just the Confederate ones, but when they're pulling down like statues of Columbus, in Wisconsin, they were smashing up statues of like abolitionists. So it's not even really a political thing. They're just smashing out. What replaces them is going to be like really ugly and demoralizing. The big example I can think of was I think it was in Bristol where they pulled down the statue of like a slave owner. They replaced it with they replaced it temporarily with a statue of one of the Black Lives Matter protests. It's just an objectively ugly statue. It's not even flattering to the subject. In fact, you can even argue it's kind of racist because it kind of exaggerates, like, this was like a black woman protesting. It exaggerates her facial features in like a way. It's like something you'd see in like an A. Wyatt Man cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. No, I saw that. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. But it seems to me like a form of intellectual bullying to put people in the position of defending. One is not defending the Confederacy. One is defending something even more important than the Confederacy, which probably does deserve some defense. I wouldn't make the defense myself. I'm not, involved. But I think anytime people die in a war, how can I put it? I just simply don't see those soldiers as evil people. Is I guess what I want to say. They're just young guys who got conscripted and fought and died, and to sneer at them and to smear them as offensive to me. But I think there's a great. It's amazing to me that there's not a single art teacher in America who will stand up and defend these monuments as art, as public art. So we're going to be a society that doesn't have public art. To me, this is simply so offensive. To me, it's just so low. It's I don't know.
We'll have public art. It'll just be like a woman masturbating in public or something really disgusting and degrading.
Yes, I think that's right. That's right. That's exactly what it will be. And the movie of the year will be, a home movie of the president defecating or something like that.
Now that would be kind of awesome.
Yeah,
that would be kind of, in a sick way.
Yeah, they'll put a camera on the bottom of the toilet. I'm very discouraged by all these things. But that story, what I don't know. I'm not saying it's a good story necessarily, but what amused me was the idea that this American would show up and then kill all those boys who are destroying that monument, and he does so because they're trying to destroy his Mustang. He has a beautiful Mustang parked outside, and they're scratching it, and they're probably going to rob him.
They fucked around and they found out.
Yeah, right. And I don't know. I just love the idea of so the and of course he's American, so he's a foreigner in that country. He's a foreigner, and so who is he? Is he the imperial? Who's the imperialist? I don't know. But that kind of irony interests me. Or I don't know if it interests me, but that's what catches my attention in our times. They're just so rich. They're kind of rich with irony. I feel, I suppose. But yeah, that imperialism was maybe my most recent piece that I've sent you.
Yeah, I think it is the most recent. You also talk about other things as well. There's a story about Japan and what can only be described, I guess, as an S&M club.
Yeah,
I found that one hilarious just because it's so off the wall.
Yeah, right. It was meant to be off the wall. It's completely how would I say, extrapolation. A kind of and ironically, I didn't even think of this, but that's I think I called the club the Imperial Club, didn't I? I think that's right. So I was right playing on that idea too.
Take your lashes for the emperor.
Yes, exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. That's
anyway.
Sayonara. Yeah.
Yeah, sayonara. And there's all kinds of good stuff in Bluff City. Like the poems are hilarious. The stories are interesting. There's even a play which is pretty good too. I would like to urge everyone to go buy it when it comes out this Friday, August 21st. Yes, go buy it at Terror House Press.
Right. I hope people will buy it. Yeah, you're right. That play. By the way, now you said you're from Upper State New York. What area?
I'm from Syracuse, actually.
Are you? Okay.
And you said this play debuted in Auburn? That's not too far away.
Yes, that's right. I was just going to say that. We moved to New Jersey, and I think I arrived and moved into our new apartment. I lived in Edgewater, New Jersey, right across the Hudson from the city. And I think that very same week, or certainly that month, I got a call from the community college up there, and he wanted to do that little play, and I went up and watched it. And they did a great job. That play is, well, in a way, I guess I'm beginning to think there might be a theme tying these things, because that play is about the girl who turns on the boy and the girl are students, and they're in a dormitory, and the boy clearly is thinking that they're going to go to bed with each other, and she takes offense that this is assumed, and you get into a little feminist rant that she delivers to him, and then before you know it, they're both conjuring up fantasies of the ideal woman and the ideal man, and the tough guy and the tough girl, and all this kind of stuff. So they're what they imagine comes alive on the stage, and that's sort of an S&M thing too, as I recall.
Oh, right, yeah, I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, little power struggle. Power. I feel power is behind all of this. By the way, I don't think that there's. I guess I don't believe in what do I want to say? Idealism. I think that people are very rarely really out for anything other than power. You know? I was thinking about these. I was just reading an article about people demanding to be called a different pronoun. You know, call me they. And as a teacher, I've read that teachers are now being fired for refusing to obey their students when they say, you know, don't call me him, call me her, and this kind of thing. The teacher makes a mistake, and then they're fired for dissing their student.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson was all about criticizing that before he lost his mind.
Well, it's not so much that I want to criticize that, but what I want to say as a teacher is, I know that when a student tells you what to do, what's going on there is not that he wants to be called him or her. What he wants is for you to obey him.
Yeah, plus, like, here's the thing about the whole pronoun debate that people don't consider. You usually use pronouns when you're not talking to someone directly. Like, I'm talking to you, Dave. I should call your name, David, etc.
Yes.
But if you weren't in the room, I'd be like, oh, he, there, that's how that works. So these people, what the pronoun debate is basically people trying to control what others say about them when they're not in the room.
Yes, so true. It's all about control. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And then the thrill, the joy they must get when they finger you as, you said I was a he, but I'm a she, and they delight in seeing you put down a peg. This is the manipulation I'm talking about.
Yeah, manipulation. Anyway, this interview's gone on for quite a while, a bit longer than I expected, but I've been enjoying myself. But
I have too.
I think we should close it out just because I think we got things. I'm sure we all have things to do.
Sure.
But yeah, David, BLUFF CITY is going to be out on August 21st.
Right. I'm very excited.
It'll be at Terra House Press. If you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll get a special coupon code that'll let you pre-order at a discount. You can sign up for that at terrahousepress.com. David, is there anything else you'd like to plug or promote, website or anything, social media?
You could look at my website. It's under David Lohrey, and I have a previous book of poetry that's listed there, and then much of the content is poems that have appeared here and there. And then I have some followers, and I try to put up all of their work onto my site. So if you were to connect with me, I would be sure to promote your own work.
Definitely. So go check out David's website. It'll be there'll be a link to it in the description. Bryden, anything you want to plug?
Hate in China.
Yes, that's a very good point. I certainly can subscribe to that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, whatever, plug it. Yeah, that's fine with me. But yeah, go check out Bryden on DLive. His website will also be in the show notes, and all the places where you can find Bryden. And of course, if you want to check my work out, it's mattforney.com, and all my other stuff will be in the description as well. And that'll do it for this episode of Terror House Radio. Be sure to check in every day, Terror House Magazine, terrorhousemag.com for our latest publications. You can check out our books at Terror House Press, terrorhousepress.com. BLUFF City by David Lohrey coming August 21st. You can follow our social media links in the description. And don't forget that you can always check out past episodes of Terror House Radio at terrorhouseradio.com. Terror House Radio is produced by Bryden Proctor and presented by Jug. Intro music by Meme Extremist. Il Jim I non coverundum. Don't the bastards bind you down. I'm Matt Forney with Bryden Proctor and David Lohrey, and we are out.